It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody, where every week we seek inspiration from great men and women to become the heroes and heroines of our own lives. And you are here with your hosts. I am Andrew Bernstein. You are Robert Begley. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing great, Andy. I am, in fact, hungry for heroism. In today's episode, I could look at the side of pancakes and wonder what kind of syrup would I put on the pancakes. Well, we're going to talk about
those pancakes. They make me think of a real heroine of breakfast foods, and that would be the illustrious Aunt Jemima.
That's right.
Aunt Jemima, who has been canceled, in our day by woke leftists, but we are going to honor her here as a hero, as a heroine of capitalism, and just a heroine, period. Real name, Nancy. Actually, her married name was Nancy Green. Was her family
and that's
name
the name. That's the name that she goes by. We're going to show you some pictures of her headstone, the heroic effort to restore her name by some family members. But Andy, just three things I'd like us to cover essentially, and you just talked on the first one. How do we maintain the legacy of somebody who is part of American history, but it might not be told the way a certain narrative wants to portray it? That's number one. Number two, what's the role of marketing and advertising in the culture? Is that a positive or is it a negative? And then the third one is more broadly, stereotypes. How do we react to stereotypes? And there's certainly the racist aspect of it. We'll go into some deeper philosophical ideas on that. But on the legacy, let's tell Nancy Green's story and the heroic battle of somebody who was born into slavery.
Yes, and so I wanted to add, I think we should comment on that. What is the just briefly, because this focus is on Nancy Green, who became Aunt Jemima, but what's the real method to fight racism in any of its hideous iterations? Because it's not just in America, it's all over the world.
Everywhere.
It has been going back to caveman times when the tribalism caused members of one tribe to hate, and war constantly against members of the other tribe. So that tribal mentality is still with us today and is devastating. So we comment on that briefly. But our focus is on Nancy Green, like you said, born into slavery in Kentucky, right? 1834.
Yeah, roughly 1834. It's really hard to have records, sadly, of slaves. They just didn't document them so well. But after the Civil War, which cost 600,000 American lives, she became free, 1865. And by 1870, she went up north to Chicago and lived with a family called the Walkers. And they were wealthy, and she was competent. She was a good cook. She was a good storyteller. And they thought, wow, we have something here. And then comes 1890, she's hired by this flour mills company. And 1893, Chicago, famous Columbian Exposition, she is there with a 40-pound, we have some images that will show 40-foot story, 40-foot high box of flour. And she ends up selling, Andy, 50,000 boxes of pancakes. Okay, at the Chicago.
She was a money maker, without a doubt.
She was a money maker, that's for sure.
No, I'll say her personality as well as her cooking ability was very congenial, and people took to her. They really liked her. She's just a good. Sounds like she's just a good, warm-hearted, good-natured human being.
Yes.
And let me point something out too. The Walker family, the kids that she was cooking for. And I'm not sure if she took on part of a Mammy role, or that traditional stereotypical Mammy role that a lot of good-natured and loving Black women did for these wealthy white families. I'm not sure, but one of the Walker kids grew up to be a judge, and another one grew up to be an MD. And I think it was the judge who recommended her to the flour company that they hire her to be the image, and the woman
Yeah.
for, for this company. So, her competence and her warmth of personality, and presumably her trustworthiness of character, which is the most
Yes.
important thing about any human being, motivated the judge, she's a judge of all professions, to recommend her to the flower company.
Yeah. So she earned it in
Was she
effect.
a mammy at all, or was she just a cook for the Walker family?
I think she was, and frankly, even that role, even that title, which might offend, offend some people today, but this was a legitimate thing. Let's make it clear, Andy, as we've done in the Hero Show in the past, we know slavery was a black mark on America. We've covered former slaves, Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass. And so in line with that, we want to show how people overcome these obstacles. And this idea of the Mammy, just want to unpack that. I remember as a kid, Andy, Gone with the Wind was like the movie that all of us, I'm like 5, 6 years old, we'd always watch this movie. And the Mammy in that movie, she just struck me as this forceful personality who wanted to do good. Okay. And so then years later, when I look at the pancake, and I'll show you here throughout the ages of different periods of Aunt Jemima, the one that I remember the most was this one here from the 1970s, 1980s. And I actually had that same image, like, wow, this is like a warm person, but who's stern when she has to be. And the fact that this is like some kind of demeaning position would never have occurred to me, Andy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the black woman mammy is a subcategory of a nanny, right? Of somebody a family hires to take care of their children. And if you care about your children, or in the case of slavery, they're not hired, but they're just appointed to take care of their children. But if you care about your children, and I think many, many, many parents do, you don't let just anybody nanny them. You want somebody who, like you said, Robert, is this combination of loving and and strict, who will lay down the law for the kids because mom and dad are elsewhere. The nanny is a stand-in for mom and dad, and somebody that you trust. Above all, as they're related to this is the babysitter. You need somebody of strong character you're going to trust, with your children. And so I think let's take the famous literary examples first, and then go to real life. In Margaret Mitchell's novel Gone with the Wind, to me, that's a great book, by the way.
It is.
Yeah, it's a magnificent novel, whether you agree with its ideas or not. It's a great literary work. But to me, Mammy was the most morally upright character in the novel. And Hattie McDaniel played her brilliantly in the movie. Remember she tells Rhett and Scarlett, you two are nothing but mules and horses harness. She's not afraid to speak up.
That's right.
She was a slave, but she's not afraid. She was forthright. She was not afraid to speak up when her quote masters were doing stuff that she thought was immoral or dishonest. And by the way, another great literary example is in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, where the cook wasn't named Calpurnia, right? The cook, and I think she also functioned as a nanny because the kid's mother was deceased, right? In Inherit the Wind, and the father was a lawyer. And I remember, from the novel, Calpurnia taking the young children to the black church, these young white kids in the black church, and then the minister and most of the black members of the flock had no problem, but there was a few people say these are white people. We can't go to the white church. Why should they come to the black church? Calpurnia said, from a religious standpoint, we're human beings, the same one God. We worship the same God. Their mother's gone, their father's busy doing this and that. I'm taking them to this church, whether you like it or not. Real moral strength, real moral backbone. And I suspect in real life, there's a lot of nannies, white, black, or whatever race, who are like that, morally upright, care about the kids, take care of the kids in every possible way. And I suspect in real life, a lot of these mammies were exactly the way Margaret Mitchell and Harper Lee portrayed them, fictionally. So,
as virtuous, as virtuous individuals,
morally upright women
Yes.
who really helped develop the moral character of the children that they were assigned to take care of. And for that, you get 2 thumbs up. Slavery is
Yes.
evil, but being a nanny or a mammy in this case and doing that's a heavy responsibility to take care of these kids, to do it well, and everybody love them and give them the moral training that they need. I think a lot of these women, black, white, have done it very well. And so
and even today, Andy, if you go to today, they're usually foreigners as far as in America goes. It's usually Latinas, at least in the New York area. That's like the dominant that I would see as far as like nannies go. And it's a totally respectable an important role to play. So, and also,
taking care
Andy,
of somebody's, you have the responsibility of taking care of somebody's young children. That is a tough job. And it's, if you do it well, that's a very, very, very virtuous job that we should all respect and look up to.
Yep. Actually, I want to show the one image of this is her at the Chicago exhibition, 1893, with all these boxes of pancakes and this 24-foot flower box that she was standing in front of. So clearly she made an impact. She resonated with the American public, both black and white public, by the way, not just the blacks or not just the whites. I mean, here was
everybody eats
in
pancakes,
your living room,
right?
In your kitchen. That's right. Here was a form of integration in your kitchen and dining room, because I would, as I said, I'd stare at that syrup like forever, Andy, and I was just fascinated with it. And in no way did I consider it something derogatory at all. She put a smile on my face. I knew I was going to be eating something, maybe not the healthiest thing, but more, at least delicious. And so,
yeah, you're right, Rob. When I was a kid and have Aunt Jemima pancakes or Aunt Jemima maple syrup, it never occurred to me that this was a racist symbol. When I thought about it at all, it was that she's doing a good job marketing a good product and probably making money on this, all of which is good. That's the way. That's the rational way to look at the Aunt Jemima merchandising.
So let's move on to merchandising, because she's such a big hit in 1893 that they sign her for like 20 years, the lifetime contract. You're going to be the face of this brand. And she's so popular. She sells out places where she goes. There's little dolls, there's ragged, dolls of her and all this other kind of merchandising. Now, the fact that money didn't end up going to the family, I mean, she did sign a contract, and we could talk about if that's honored properly or not. That's a different question for today's episode. But at least she's so popular that in Paris for the 1900 World's exhibit, they invite her. She's like, no, I don't want to go there. I'm American. Now Paris in 1900, just to give you a global context, was a lot more important in world affairs than it is today. Okay. It was, and she was like, no, I'm staying in America, even though I have, was raised as a slave. I have my freedom now, and I'm going to be doing something that I love, I'm good at, and I'm going to get paid for.
Yeah. And getting to Paris back in the day was a hassle. It's not like a 6-hour flight out of JFK.
That's true.
You're crossing the pond in an ocean liner, which could be exciting. It could be an adventure. You could go someplace you seasick. But no, it was traveling was more onerous. So I can understand why Nancy agrees. No, thank you very much, but I'm staying at home and working here.
So this idea of branding and marketing, Andy, in fact, one article I read said she was the first human in merchandising that was like on the cover of something, and again, it just resonated with the American public. And what are the values and advantages and disadvantages of marketing products here. Like if we just look at a broader question.
I'm sorry. I thought you would. I thought you would.
Yeah. Okay. So I can. Yeah. For me, I think so. If I look at this, what are the benefits? I see a lot of benefits because basically, what marketing says is this product will make you happier, better, fitter, healthier, etc. And it kind of appeals to the egoistic element in an individual, because if it basically says, you're going to be old and you're going to die tomorrow if you have this thing, not too many people are really going to sign up for that, right, Andy? Unless it's Dr. Kowalski. That's a different.
Yeah, right. People who don't want to live in it anymore. Yeah, but marketing, promoting a product, branding, this is all part of bringing a product, to the marketplace, getting more customers, making money. If the product is good, then advertising is a very, and if the product is good and the advertising is honest, then this is a very, very important form, of capitalism and selling the product. Remind me of Steve Jobs at Apple, because Steve Jobs had a vision. Whatever he was like, we have to do a hero show episode, on him. But whatever cantankerous kind of guy he was, and very difficult to get along with or work for in many ways. He was like Howard Roark in Ayn Rand's great novel, The Fountainhead, in that he had a vision of what the finished product was to be. And the customers didn't get a say in this matter. And he would say things like, did Leonardo da Vinci ask his patrons or ask the people who were going to look at his painting what kind of strokes what color this should be? No, he was the genius. He knew what the finished product had to be. The computer's like a painting. So we make the computer in accordance with our specifications. We know it's brilliant, but this may not be what the public wants. So now we have to advertise it. Now we have to promote it. Now we have to teach them in the advertising why this product is more outstanding than anything else in the marketplace. So this is what honest advertising for a good product does. It teaches people, hey, we got this product. This stuff is really good. You like pancakes? And who doesn't like pancakes? This is the most delicious. They got the flavor is the best. In our syrup, give it a try, and you'll see advertisers say, what was it back when we were kids, Robert? It was Pepsi, wasn't it? Take the Pepsi challenge.
The Pepsi blindfolding, yeah.
Yeah, and they would have people drink Pepsi and Coke. Now, I much prefer Coke to Pepsi, but that's not the point. There's a lot of people who prefer Pepsi. I like to me, Coke has more carbonation and less syrup, and Pepsi has less carbonation and more syrup. That's what it tastes like to me anyway. But the point is, gazillions of people like Pepsi. So you the Pepsi challenge, and you have people, you motivate people to try the product. And some people like it, some people won't. But this is what honest advertising for a good product does. And Aunt Jemima was Nancy Green as the pitch woman for the Aunt Jemima product, really good product, and she sold it very effectively. Character is most important in human life, but personality matters too. She was an amiable, good-natured, warm-hearted human being, and that sells. Most people are going to respond to it. Maybe a few curmudgeons won't, but even they might be, warmed up to somebody as genial as Nancy Green. It sells, and she was a very effective pitch woman for this company.
I agree, Andy. In fact, I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
So, in fact, the designers, I have a statement here. They say the Aunt Jemima logo stands for caring, kindness, and cordiality towards close people who you want to take care of, and for whom you want to cook delicious food. I mean, that's just beautiful, and that's what I think of when I think of Aunt Jemima's products and how they appeal to me. And I think I agree with everything you just said about the marketing side. My one last thing on this before we move on to the stereotypes is People still have free will, so they can say no to advertising. We're often told this, I couldn't help it, like they put this stuff in front of me or in front of kids, and they, no, we still have free will. We still have the choice to say no. And which is why nowadays I eat gluten-free pancakes. And it's like, because I know the syrupy stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right. You reminded me, there was two movies. One of them was anti-McDonald's. What was the name of it?
Supersize Me, and then Fathead. Fathead's a fabulous film.
Yeah. So the Supersize Me movies was at the very least implying, if not outright stating, that McDonald's, that people were like deterministic automata. They go into McDonald's, they have to go to McDonald's, they have to eat this junk food and everything, and then it's unhealthy and they're overweight and everything. But in Fathead, the makers of the film showed just what you would say. Human beings have free will, right? And then somebody says to him in the film, was it supersize it?
He orders a soft drink, and she's like, "Do you want to supersize that?" He says, "No," and he turns to the camera. See, I just said no. Andy, that was exactly on my mind. Yeah.
See how easy that is. Yeah, it's exactly right. People can say no. That, you remember when we were kids, they'd advertise, the cigarette commercial on TV. You'd always have some suave James Bond kind of guy. He's dressed well. He's got the fancy car. He's got the Porsche or the Ferrari or something. These beautiful women on his arm. He's smoking, whatever cigarette, Camel or whatever it was. And, they're trying to lure, the Marlboro ads, the real rugged, Western, the cowboy, real men smoke Marlboros and everything. And they're trying to lure you in, they're trying to seduce you. And you're right. I said, I don't have to smoke cigarettes. I could choose not to. Especially when it started coming out that cigarette smoking was causally linked to heart disease, lung disease.
Yeah.
Just say no, right? People, So advertising is a legitimate way an important way to promote a product, and people have free will. People can make their choices, especially in a competitive marketplace where there's all kinds of alternatives to a product, all kinds of other directions they could go. And for pleasure, they don't have to smoke cigarettes. There's 100 other things that they could do.
Right.
Right. And so on and so forth. As long as the advertiser is not dishonest.
That's right. That's right.
If the tobacco companies, once that information came out, the tobacco companies said, nah, cigarette smoking is not harmful, to you. Given the information we had by the 1960s or 1970, that's dishonest. But anyway, I don't think cigarette ads should be banned. I think that's ridiculous. I think we should teach people that they have free will and to use it. Just say no to things that are harmful to your health.
Yeah. So moving on, Andy, to the role of stereotypes in the culture. And I'll stick on this model because my father was born, I've said this before, he was born in Ireland, and there was a product that I always had as a kid.
Lucky Charms.
And guess what? James O'Keefe, the guy who runs Project Veritas, the thing that put him on the map, Andy, and I met him and I shook his hand. He's at Rutgers College, and he films himself with one of the administrators there, and he's saying Lucky Charms is offensive to me as an Irishman. This leprechaun is offensive, and he's reading like all the restrictions that Rutgers has. And the administrator's sitting there. I'll put the YouTube link. It's like 3-minute video, and at the end he's eating Lucky Charms, like just showing that he pulled the rug over these people. I don't care. I see the leprechaun and I'm like, so what? It's freaking funny, so is it a matter of, when we were kids, Andy, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never harm me. It's like, so what? You say words. I don't value what you're saying. You can't, your insults mean nothing to me because I'm comfortable in who I am. And therefore it's like, you say what you want. That's your problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Robert. I think I mentioned recently on the show, I used to go into Marine Park to play basketball, you know, and
Yeah.
I won't use the same language. I still remember these guys' names, happen to be Irish. There's that bleeping he Bernstein, you know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they were racist or if they were just bantering. I didn't even bother to ever find out. But yeah, I think the key point here is, and it's important, really important, and we could say the essence of it briefly. What's the proper way to combat racism in any of its forms, whether it's directed against blacks in America or blacks elsewhere, or against Jews or against whites or against, you know, Christians, or, you know, against the Tutsis in Rwanda, or the Armenians, the, you know, Armenian genocide in the Ottoman Empire. It's endless. It's caveman mentality. And the panacea for any of these forms of racism is colorblind individualism. So we recognize that character is what matters, you know, about a human being. Everything else is either secondary or maybe even irrelevant. You know, race is irrelevant when it comes to character. And so once we do that, and you know, and it sticks in my craw, Rob. It's really wrong. The woke left who canceled Nancy Green and Aunt Jemima, they believe, and they'll say it publicly, that colorblind individualism is a microaggression. It's and they're dead wrong. It shows that they don't care about combating racism, because this is the only cure for racism. Right. So and I just want, once we realize that character above all is what we judge in a human being, then, you know, race and all this other stuff becomes incidental, and we can enjoy ethnic humor. I love ethnic humor, you know, and today, you know, you're gonna, you know, so many people are gonna be offended by it. But the point is, once we recognize race is irrelevant, we could play with it. Yeah, it's innocuous, because we recognize race is irrelevant to anything important about a human being.
Yeah, Andy, to follow up on that, you and I had an advantage of growing up in New York City, where we can choose to parse out the individual from the group. We saw good and bad examples of whites, blacks, Italians, Jews, this and that. And we had the capability of saying, no, I'm not going to cast out an entire race, because I just met one that, it's like the black swan. I met one that is actually good, and therefore everybody's an individual. I treat them accordingly to what their moral character demands of me, and not just these blanket, you know, these blanket statements here. And if you talk about humor, Andy, George Carlin, probably my favorite comedian. Yeah, he's Irish, and he's like, "What's up with this Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish?" You know, and he doesn't say I'm offended by that, but he's like, how come they don't have the murdering Italians or the bargaining Jews? It's like he's got a point. Andy, if you're an Italian actor today, what are the odds that you have not been in a mafia movie? Zero. Okay, zero. You name me a famous Italian actor, he's been in a mob movie. So that's
De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino.
Forget it. And Scorsese directed 50 mafia movies, you know, and Francis Ford Coppola. It's like so embedded, you know, and this is where the collectivism side comes in, where it's like, no, there is certainly, you know, there are individuals, and then there are groups, and we need to go by the individualist premise if we want to eliminate that. Exactly what you said earlier.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you're on the premise of colorblind individualism, then, you know, and you learn that when you're a kid, then you look at, you know, the Aunt Jemima maple syrup and the pancake mix and everything, and, you know, this is a good product. She's selling a good product. It doesn't even occur to you that this is racist. This is an individual spokeswoman for a company I like, doing a good job selling a product that I favor, and so good for her. I hope she made a lot of money.
Yeah.
There's a tribal mentality that still exists, thinking in collectivist terms, thinking only in groups, not in terms of individuals like they should. That's the problem with the left today. They, you know, if they really cared about Black lives or women's rights or gays or transgenders, they would embrace the principle of individual rights, because that's the only protection any of us have, especially members of a persecuted minority. And but they loathe the principle of individual rights. Their influence here is Marxism and postmodernism. They're collectivists to the bone. They see groups, Blacks, whites, males, females, whatever. They don't think in terms of individuals, and consequently, they'll never be able to combat racism, even if they wanted to, which they don't. I had my say.
Yeah,
I got that off my chest.
Sure. And to piggyback on novelist philosopher Ayn Rand, the smallest minority is the individual. Okay, so if you're clamoring for minorities' rights, well, the smallest minority out of all of them is the individual. So coming back, Andy,
let me one last point, Robert.
Yes.
Anybody out there who does care about Black lives or the rights of women or gays or whatever, read Ayn Rand carefully. Read The Fountainhead carefully. Read Atlas Shrugged carefully, because Ayn Rand gives us the intellectual ammunition to protect the rights of all individuals, which is especially important for people who are members of groups that have been historically persecuted.
Yeah, and I'll just say in her nonfiction book, The Virtue of Selfishness, she has a full chapter entitled Racism, where she unpacks this concept.
Brilliant essay on racism.
So coming back to Nancy Green, she lives to 89 years old, okay? And sadly, like the latter part of her life, she was living with, I think, a grandnephew, and she wasn't as known. Okay, I guess the reputation just didn't, as she aged, it didn't continue with her, and they found another, I guess, replacement for the Aunt Jemima brand. And 1923, 89 years old, she's standing on the sidewalk in Chicago and gets hit by a car that comes on, onto the sidewalk, and it's so tragic.
Yeah.
And they didn't know until they discovered who it was. They described her, and there's an obituary that you can find out about her. And then this woman, Sherry Williams, there's a short documentary on her doing this work, trying to restore the legacy of Nancy Green. And her goal is to get a headstone because she's buried in a place with where nobody knew in Chicago suburbs. And finally, at the end, they do show an actual headstone, so you get to see what she looks like, what Nancy Green looks like. And look at the pancakes there, Andy.
That's great. That's great.
I mean, it's like this woman's story is the American dream. Okay, this is only in America. It's one of those things, Andy, only in America, where you could be born as a slave, you get your freedom, and then, you're on the side of a product or products where millions of people just have this benevolent association with what you do.
Right. And she moved out of the Jim Crow South. And she was working for that. She was working for the family, the Walker family in Illinois. And it was, I know there were white race riots in Illinois. They weren't limited to the South against Blacks. Still, Illinois was freer. The northern states, north of the Mason-Dixon line, were freer than the southern states, where there were no Jim Crow laws legally persecuting Black America. So she made that wise decision to work for the Walker family in Illinois, which also contributed to her success because there were fewer opportunities in the South. Although, as we point out, we pointed out when we discussed Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee Institute, Booker T. built that into an outstanding college in Alabama. So, give some hat tip here to white Alabamans who, unfortunately, many were racist. And the Jim Crow laws were brutal in Alabama, but obviously not all white people in the South were racists. And the Tuskegee Institute, George Washington Carver, people like that were free enough at Tuskegee Institute to make it a great university, educate many, really outstanding Black students. George Washington Carver made real contributions to agricultural science at Tuskegee. And it shows us there are degrees of evil. And the American racism in the Jim Crow South was certainly evil, but it's not the communists. It's not the Nazis. They would have wiped out their class or race enemies.
And it's not today either, Andy. It's actually not today either. That's in the past. And whoever still maintains that degree of racism, they're hidden. Okay, they're on the run properly.
Yeah, right. I mean, South Carolina, cradle of the Confederacy, elects a black man to the U.S. Senate. Georgia has two black men running, for the U.S. Senate. Unfortunately, the one was a Marxist, who won, but that's not the point in this context. Yeah, you're right. The South is much different. The country is much more advanced today. The charge of systemic racism against America in 2023 is just false, although it's still around, but it's tremendously attenuated. And again, we should give credit to the most important point, and that is the country was founded, for all of its flaws in slavery, was founded on the principle of individualism and individual rights. And Americans took that principle seriously. That's what led to an abolitionist movement that abolished slavery in 1865. And that's what led to the civil rights movement, which finally ended the Jim Crow persecution of blacks in America. I just want to say here that speaking of the principle of individualism, the woke left that we're talking about often admire communists and communism. I mean, they want Howard Zinn's book. Zinn was a member of the Communist Party. He's never getting a Hero Show episode. He wrote a book, People's History of the United States, which is pure lies about America. They support that book, the woke left. In fact, they probably studied it, many of them, where they got their anti-American ideas from. They're communists, and the communists still impose human slavery today in 2023 in North Korea and China and other places. So these guys are condemning the slavery that America abolished in 1865 while they're supporting communism, which imposes slavery to this day. And the key point, of course, is you really want to end slavery, you really want to end racism, individualism, individual rights. That's the principle. So that's what that commitment to it enabled people like Madam C.J. Walker, who we did a Hero Show on, and many other, Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, Nancy Green, to rise up out of slavery, rise up out of poverty, rise against racism, and become, have real careers in the United States.
Yeah. Great point there, Andy. Just going for me, wrapping up on the founders, my favorite, Alexander Hamilton, his mother's name was Rachel Fawcett and her sister's name was Jemima. So Alexander Hamilton had an Aunt Jemima. He actually literally had an Aunt Jemima. Yes.
How were her pancakes?
Not as good as
Nancy Green,
the real Aunt Jemima's, that's for sure.
Well, Alexander Hamilton, we did a Hero Show episode on him. Grew up in such poverty in the Caribbean. They may not have been able to afford, the flour and the syrup and everything that good pancakes require.
Yeah. But I think, Andy, we should salute this woman, her legacy, the pancakes.
Yes, thank you.
Be eating mine soon, right?
Warm them up. Thank you, Nancy Green, for doing such a good job promoting this great product. And as soon as we sign off, I'm jumping in a car. I'm heading up to IHOP, and I'm gonna have me a big stack of pancakes, butter, and maple syrup. So that's the way to honor Nancy Green and Aunt Jemima, right?
Yep. Exactly.
All right, everybody. I'm Robert and everybody. I'm glad we were able to cancel culture, for today and resuscitate the heroic image of Nancy Green, Aunt Jemima. And next week, once again, we will be back on the Hero Show to celebrate more heroes and heroines as we seek inspiration to become, the best versions of ourselves. So we'll see you next week, everybody. Once again on the Hero Show.